Your hand reaches into the bag before you finish the thought, not after before. The decision was made somewhere you never had access to, and by the time you noticed, it was already done. You did not choose that. You executed it. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole story. Close your eyes for a moment and try to catch the exact instant a craving begins. Not when you notice it. When it starts, you cannot find it. That moment has never been available to you. Not once in your life. Here's what that means. The system running your habits is not the one reading these words. There are two separate processes happening in your brain right now, and they do not have equal power. One of them plans, one of them acts, and the one that acts is much, much older. The older system does not think in language, it does not reason, it does not weigh consequences. It learned something once, and it learned it hard, and now it runs that lesson on a loop faster than consciousness can interrupt. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Anne Graybiel at MIT began mapping what happens inside the brain when a rat learns to run a maze. The maze was simple, a T-shaped chocolate at one end. The rat had to learn which way to turn, and while it learned, Graybiel's team recorded the electrical activity across thousands of neurons. At first, the rat's brain was lit up everywhere. Every step was new, every decision cost effort. The neurons fired constantly, testing, adjusting, trying. It looked like thinking. Then the rat learned the maze, and something happened that nobody fully expected. The brain went quiet. The middle part of the run, the part where the rat was just running, produced almost no neural activity. The brain had compressed the whole sequence into a single package. Start signal, run, reward. One trigger, one chunk, done. The neurons that had been firing throughout the maze now only fired at the beginning and the end. Graybiel called this chunking. The brain had taken a repeated sequence of decisions and collapsed it into a single automatic unit, not to save time, to save energy. A brain running a habit costs almost nothing. A brain making a decision is expensive, and this is where things get strange, because chunking does not care what the habit is. The brain compresses what repeats. Good sequences, bad sequences, sequences that help you, sequences that are slowly breaking you. All of it gets packaged the same way, filed in the same structure, protected by the same mechanism. The structure is called the basal ganglia. It sits near the center of the brain, below the cortex, older than language, older than planning. The basal ganglia does not communicate in words. It speaks in patterns, and once it learns a pattern, it holds it with remarkable grip. Patients with severe amnesia, people who cannot form a single new conscious memory, can still learn new habits. In 1994, neuropsychologist Larry Squire at UC San Diego documented patients who could not tell you what they had done 5 minutes ago, could not recognize the researcher who had worked with them for years, but could still acquire new motor skills, new behavioral routines, new preferences. The conscious brain was gone. The habit brain was intact. This is the part that changes how the whole system looks. Your habits are not stored where your memories are. They are not stored where your plans are. They live in a separate structure that does not answer to either of those things. When the basal ganglia fires a habit, the cortex can observe. It can even object, but by then, the hand is already in the bag. There is a cue. There is a routine. There is a reward. This is the circuit that Anne Graybiel and her colleagues have spent 40 years mapping. The cue triggers the chunk executes. The reward confirms the pattern and makes the next trigger slightly more sensitive. The circuit does not ask whether you want this. It asks whether you did it before, and here is the detail that most people have wrong. The reward does not happen when you get the thing. It happens before. The anticipation is the reward. The moment your brain recognizes the cue, the bag, the couch, the smell, the stress response, the specific chair, it releases dopamine, not after you eat the chip, when you see the bag. This was established by neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz at Cambridge in a long series of experiments in the 1990s. He was recording from individual dopamine neurons in monkeys, watching exactly when they fired. The original assumption was that they fired when reward arrived. They did, at first, but as the animal learned the pattern, the dopamine signal moved. It jumped backward in time from the reward to the cue that predicted the reward. The arrival of the reward stopped producing dopamine. What produced it was the moment the animal recognized that reward was coming. If the reward arrived late or was smaller than expected, dopamine dropped below baseline. That drop is what you call disappointment. That drop is also what makes the habit try again harder to get the signal back to normal. Your bad habits are not malfunctions. They are the system doing exactly what the system was designed to do in an environment the system was never designed for. The system evolved to encode survival behaviors quickly and protect them from interference. Find food, remember where, escape predator, remember how. The brain that could learn those routes fast and run them without thinking was the brain that survived. Deliberation cost time. Time cost survival. The brain that could automate a behavior and never revisit it was, for most of human history, winning. And then the cues changed. The ancestral cue for sweetness said, "This is rare. Take it." The modern cue for sweetness is everywhere, every hour, engineered to hit the recognition threshold precisely. The dopamine fires on schedule, the routine executes, the reward arrives, the circuit deepens. You did not build this system. You inherited it from people who lived in a world where this system kept them alive. They succeeded. You are here. And part of what you inherited is a brain that falls in love with patterns faster than it falls out of them. That asymmetry is real, and it is documented. New habits take weeks. Old habits do not disappear. In 1999, a study by David Neal and Wendy Wood at the University of Southern California showed that people in familiar environments executed their habits at much higher rates than people in new environments, even when they had consciously decided to change. Move to a new city, break the pattern, come home, and the old cues are waiting. The environment is the trigger, you are not, which is the part the self-help version of this story always forgets. It treats the habit as a personal moral failing, a weakness of will, a character defect. But will is located in the prefrontal cortex. Habits are located in the basal ganglia, and these two structures are not in constant communication. They operate on different timescales. The cortex reasons in seconds. The basal ganglia responds in milliseconds. By the time the cortex has finished forming a thought about what you should do, the habit has already begun. Now here is where the story turns. Because there is a genuine and serious scientific argument that the solution is simply to use that cortex more, to pay more attention, to interrupt the pattern at the cue. Plenty of researchers have built careers on the idea that awareness is the key variable. Notice the key variable. Notice the cue, choose a different routine. The circuit can be rewired. And there is real evidence for this. The habit loop is not a lock. The basal ganglia can update. New associations can be written over old ones. People do change their habits. It happens. But there is a fact underneath this story that those accounts almost never mention. The old circuit does not erase. It weakens, but it stays. In 2012, Anne Grabiel's own lab at MIT demonstrated this directly. Rats trained on a habit, then trained to stop, then placed back in the original environment. They did not retrieve the new behavior. They retrieved the old one. The new learning had happened in the cortex. The old learning lived in the basal ganglia. And when the original cue appeared in the original context, the basal ganglia won. This is why relapse follows specific patterns. The person who quit smoking for a year walks into the bar where they used to smoke. The smell, the lighting, the social pressure, all of it is a cue. The circuit fires. Not because the person is weak, because the circuit remembers the original environment, and the original environment just reappeared. The habit did not come back. It was never gone, which means the frame of breaking a habit is wrong at the level of neuroscience. You do not break habits, you build stronger competing circuits in the same space. And the competing circuit needs its own cue, its own routine, its own reward. The old circuit needs the cue to stop appearing. These are environmental problems, not character problems. They require environmental solutions. They always did, and yet the story that sells is the one about willpower. Because the other story, the one where your environment is the primary variable, where the systems around you are doing most of the work of shaping your behavior, where the decisions about what food is available, and what is visible, and what is cheap, and what is advertised are doing more work than your intentions. That story asks harder questions. It asks who designed this environment. It asks what interests were served by designing it this way. It asks why the people who engineered the cue to reward timing in processed foods and slot machines and social media feeds knew so much about basal ganglia and told you so little. That question has an answer, and the answer is not about you. Your brain does what evolution built it to do. It finds a pattern, it compresses it, it protects it. It fires it every time the cue appears. It does this in milliseconds, below the level of thought, in a structure older than language. And then the world you live in was built, in many of its most profitable corners, by people who understood exactly how that system worked and used that understanding to make sure the cue appeared as often as possible. You are not losing a battle of willpower. You are a very old system running in a very engineered world doing exactly what you were built to do. The hand in the bag was never really about the chips. It was about a brain that learned, 10,000 years before the bag existed, that when the sweetness signal fires, you do not wait.